whenever you disturb the ground, things start to happen. And when they went on this 5-hour chase, you have a guy on a side-by-side driving over these areas that are very sacred ground. And also you have police officers chasing over this for multiple hours till they caught him. But yeah, it's been very intense investigation. A lot of stuff has gone into it. And it's definitely been the lengthiest investigation I've ever been involved with. Why are they returning the bodies, like you said? If they're able to just suck these cows up into their craft, take what they want, they obviously have the technology to vaporize them, shoot them out into space, shoot them into another dimension, cremate them, do whatever they need to do. So why are the bodies being returned? Is there other things? So we started talking with other soldiers that had been in this area for longer stints, and he found many other ones that had seen UFOs, jinns, cryptids. I even started researching it. It is pretty shocking how many of our military men and women come back from the Middle East with encounters with these jinn.
The following program is presented for general information, education and entertainment purposes only and is not intended to be advice of any kind. The content, views, thoughts and opinions expressed in this program are those of the individuals involved. The use of information on this program is at the user's own discretion.
So, Stuart, I wanted to round out our conversation with a little bit more on the nuts and bolts side here and see how we go from there.
Okay, so we're grounding the conversation back in this reality by the sounds of it.
That we are, and potentially putting it right into the ground, as it were. I know that sounds kind of weird, but we're going to be talking today with Dustin Eskelsen, who is the MUFON State Director for Utah.
Okay, well, down here in Australia, the only way we know about Utah, basically, is the Mormon Church and the Osmonds, Donnie and Marie Osmond.
Okay. I'm familiar with the Mormon Church, and I think they're sort of headquartered in Utah, but I didn't know, are the Osmonds, are they from Utah? Were they born in Utah?
Yeah, I think they're originally from there, but that's about all I know of Utah.
Okay. Well, here's a fun fact. Utah also is the home of Skinwalker Ranch.
Oh, I've heard of that. That's where it is. Okay, that's cool. You got me interested.
Yeah, and there's another property that's adjacent to Skinwalker that not many people know about. It's called, not even sure we should say it out loud, right? But it's called Space Wolf Lodge, I believe it's called. Dustin will probably correct me on that. I'm sure I'm saying it wrong. But the point is, he's been out to that area a bit to investigate and such, and he's taken part in some cattle mutilation investigations and things like that as well. And he's always got something interesting to say.
Hang on, Space Wolf Lodge. Sounds like we're getting not so grounded now, Mike.
I believe that is the name of the ranch. It's private property, so don't even bother. But yeah, I think that's what they call themselves, and they abut Skinwalker. So it's I mean, for me, it sort of goes without saying, but maybe we should say it odd. Like, I'm no expert at Skinwalker Ranch, nor have I ever been there, but it's not just that property that has crazy stuff going on. It's all around that area, and there's lots of different properties in the area. You just don't hear about them because they don't have docuseries on major networks following them around.
I think Skinwalker Ranch was owned by Bigelow. Is that right? Am I thinking about the right place?
Yeah, originally, yeah. Well, before that, it was... oh gosh, who are the original people? I forget who they were. Shoot, hold on. I don't want to screw it up, so let me just look this up real quick. And that's who it was. The Shermans owned the ranch from 1994 to 1996. I'm looking this up online. I don't have a eidetic memory, but before Robert Bigelow owned it, it was owned by the Shermans for about 2 years, and that's when all this wacky stuff really started to come about. But here's an interesting thing. Kenneth and Edith Myers owned the property from 1934 to 1994. So what? That's like 60 some years. And it's interesting to me that we didn't hear anything about it until 1994 with the Shermans. And then it was so traumatic for them that they sold it. I believe it was like their dream land, right? And it just, their dream became a nightmare. And Bigelow comes in and buys it. And that's when they started doing all this stuff with the U.S. military, yada yada, and then he ends up selling it to Brandon Fugel, who is the current owner. So it's a sort of nutshell history. Now we're not necessarily going to talk about the Skinwalker much at all, but I thought it was interesting to put out those factoids, right? I mean, who doesn't like factoids?
It's very interesting the stark contrast between the Myers owning it for about 60 years and then the Shermans for a short 2 years.
Yeah, I gotta wonder. Attention researchers out there.
Yes.
I don't know if any of the Myers are still around. Likely not, right? But someone needs to do some digging into that family who owned the property for 60 freaking years. Was there anything weird that happened? Probably yes, but if there was, why would you stay? Like, based on what I've heard about the Shermans seeing all kinds of like nightmare, living nightmares, right? Is basically what it was, which is why they sold it. Why?
I got questions here. Well, I got
yeah.
questions. And now if Sherman, no, beg your pardon, who am I saying? If Dustin is part of MUFON in Utah, I bet you he knows about these topics, Mike. I'd be interested to hear what he's got to say.
Perhaps. Well, we'll float it out there, see what happens, and see what he's got to say. That'll be pretty interesting. But nonetheless, I mean, he's definitely in the area, and I'm sure he's got some potentially. I don't know. I don't want to say he's got more wild stories than we do in SoCal, but he might, right? Because I mean, we don't really have a whole lot. I'm not aware of any cattle mutilations in Southern California. However, they could happen without my knowledge. But I do know that there's cattle mutilations a lot on the regular in Utah area. So who knows where this conversation is going to go? But we're going to talk about some cases most likely and seeing what's going on up there in Utah.
All right, let's do this.
All right. So the Universal Disclosure Podcast proudly welcomes Mr. Dustin Eskelsen. All right. So Dustin, thanks for joining us and having a chat. We've been looking forward to this. We have actually tried to do this a long time ago, and we were set to record like in the summer of last year, actually, and then there was I believe it was a cattle mutilation case that came about, and then we had to reschedule, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, this has been a long time in the works. So I thank you guys for your patience. I've had to reschedule several times, but I know you guys understand when things come up, you got to really handle them as quick as possible. So I appreciate it, guys. And I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, investigations always take the number. That's what we do, right? That's it. Takes the number one seat. Kind of curious if you have anything to share about that case with the cow.
Sure. So the case happened on July 3rd, 2025. You have a cattle rancher. His name is Paul Martinez, and he lives out in East Carbon. So East Carbon is sort of central Utah, and it's actually in Carbon County, the area which I grew up in. So how I found out about it was I was at a conference called Moon Lake Gathering that they have every year, and that one is in the Uinta Basin, and it has like treasure hunters and UFOs, Bigfoot. They sort of cover a lot of things. There's a guy there that I've become really good friends with named Ryan Burns. He owns Space Wolf Research. So it's the property that's directly south of Skinwalker Ranch. It shares a property line with it. And I've worked with him a little bit, just picking his brain, him picking my brain. During that time, a case came in for Southern Utah in which I had him accompany me because he was going back to Las Vegas. And we did an on-site investigation. And then he was telling me about this cattle mutilation that happened in my hometown. No, I had never heard of it. I was sort of removed from it. I've moved out of that area many, many moons ago. And he got me in touch with the person. So at the time, he sort of was keeping things a little close to the vest, not really telling me where it was at. He just said it, I asked him, was it in the Uinta Basin? He said it was, 80 miles outside of there. And then eventually he hooked me up with he called me and said, hey, I got the rancher I'm going to hook you up with if you want to go out and take a look at it. And then I asked him, where did it happen? He goes, it's right outside of Price. And it sort of shook me because I was like, man, that's where I grew up. So we went out there, and the cattle rancher himself, he's a cattle rancher. He grew up pretty much doing that kind of stuff his entire life, but then he later went into the coal mines. Then he later became a dentist. So he's been doing dental stuff in the town. Very well-respected guy, very bright guy too. And we went out on site and looked at it. Unfortunately, it was a little late. We got to it probably about 7 weeks after it happened. But what happened is sometime in the early morning hours of July 3rd, this cow was killed, mutilated. Its sexual organs were surgically removed. Its eyeball had like popped out about an inch, maybe even more. Its anus looked like it had been bored out. It was strange looking. No footprints nearby it. No animal footprints. No predation on it. When we went out on site, he had a dog that was very friendly, always liked to be petted. This thing wouldn't get within like 40, 50 feet of this bull. It was pretty crazy. And this bull was a Wagyu beef, so very expensive bull. The day before, they noticed that it was kind of wandering away from the herd. It was by itself along this fence line. And when they left, the ranch hands left, they sort of noted it. And then the next morning around noon is when Paul found it dead. There's a lot of other things that sort of went into this that we're sort of like looking into. So, for example, in the early morning hours that this bull was found dead, there was a major power outage in the city. When I contacted the power company, I've gotten several different sort of reports. Unfortunately, it is like dealing with a corporation. They're so afraid of legalities, even though I told them straight up, I do not blame you for the death of this cow. But we eventually got some information that at least over half the townspeople power went out that night, several hours, and they have no explanation for it. So what happened was they have a recloser. So a recloser is almost like a breaker that happens on the line. So if the line senses any strange things with the current, it'll break that current by opening it up. It's like a breaker, really. It just flips that switch, opens it up, so you're not sending electricity down that way. And then after a couple moments, it'll close again. Test it again. If it's bad, it'll open up again. And however many times it's programmed, it'll keep testing it. And then eventually it'll just open up and be like, hey, something's wrong with this line. I can't close myself again. So that happened here. It opened up. They had to send technicians out. They found no damaged equipment. When I was talking with the main person in charge of the Rocky Mountain Power Station that's in the nearby area, he told me that usually they'll find animals on the line. They'll find a car crash. Wind will blow things over. This one seemed pretty perplexing to him as well. They found no reason as to why the power went out. Another sort of strange thing is that in the early morning hours, for whatever reason, we have 5 United States Air Force planes that flew over the property. We also had something happen about a little over 2 weeks. I think it's 16 days earlier. The East Carbon Police was transporting a sort of a belligerent, believed to be high on some substance, to the jail. They're driving on this highway, and it's called Highway 123 that goes right past his ranch. This person starts getting crazy, starts kicking out the window, hitting the window with his head until he breaks it open. The police officer has to stop the car. He jumps out, runs barefoot onto Paul's property, which is over, I think, a half a mile to a mile away, steals his side-by-side and takes the police on like a 5-hour chase throughout his entire property. Now, his property, he purchased, he has a lot of property, but this specific one he purchased in the late 80s, early 90s. And there's been several instances where the BLM and other agencies have come out and they've actually roped off certain areas to stop grazing on them because this area has a lot of burial grounds from what's believed to be the Fremont Indians. So the Fremont Indians, we don't know a lot about them other than the artifacts that they've left as well as the petroglyphs. We don't know what happened to them though, but they are all over the area. There's burial grounds. People find arrowheads, pottery. On his property, they found a pit house later that was excavated by Utah State. It's now famously called the Martinez Pit House. And if you're familiar with like Skinwalker Ranch and stuff, whenever you disturb the ground, things start to happen. And when they went on this 5-hour chase, you have a guy on a side-by-side driving over these areas that are very sacred ground. And also you have police officers chasing over this for multiple hours till they caught him. That's an interesting thing to add to the story as well. When you start digging into Paul's story, this land that he's owned, he's had at least 2 other cows that have died under mysterious circumstances within a 10-year period on the same exact land. Now, what's interesting is this land, he owns some of it, but he also leases some of it from the federal government. All 3 of those cattle mutilations have happened on the federal part of his land, which I find very interesting. This area also has had like a lot of seismic activity. So when Paul was growing up in high school, he went to high school in that same town, grew up there. He's been there his whole life. He had a high school friend whose father was contracted to go out there and run lines and test the seismic activity. So I actually reached out to the Utah Geological Survey, and they have a database you can download for free of all the known seismic activity from like 18 something to 2017. And when you overlay it on Paul's property, he's had quite a few seismic earthquakes that have happened on his property throughout the years. He's also had a lot of paranormal stuff happen on his property. One time, he has a bunkhouse there that has running water, electricity, a fridge, dining table. Said one time he's leaving the area and he gets this strange feeling that he needs to turn back and go check that bunkhouse. He said, I don't know, it was just some strange feeling. So he turns back, goes inside the house. All of a sudden, both the kitchen and the bathroom sink are on full blast. Turns them off, has a plumber come back. The plumber says, I have no idea why this happened. It wasn't because of like a high pressure thing. If there was a high pressure thing, you would have had more damage here and there. Just not too long ago, he keeps a lot of trail cameras up on his property. And he has one inside the bunkhouse. And it captures pictures of the fridge opening and closing on its own. This area has had a lot of different sightings. Back in the early 70s, Paul saw his own UFOs near this area. There's a place called Sea Canyon where he saw what he described as almost like train carts that were in the sky, these rectangular crafts that were going over the canyon. We started digging, and after this newspaper article came out, originally it came out about the cattle mutilation, but then there was a follow-up one talking about paranormal investigators investigating this area. People started coming out of the woodworks, talking about their own stories of seeing strange things in Carbon County in general. And we started digging into other cattle mutilations. So in 1975, there was this explosion of cattle mutilations, not just in Utah. You have like Colorado, New Mexico, Nevada, Texas, Idaho. Like all these states were dealing with mutilation after mutilation after mutilation. We find several other mutilations that happen in Carbon County. In fact, the earliest one we found from newspaper articles that happened in Utah happened in Carbon County. There was a cattle rancher there by the name of Don Wilcox found 2 of his cows dead and mutilated. We also found this other one from a man named George Jimenez in 1975. It was around, I think it was October. Finds a cow. They believe it was dead less than two days. Surgical cuts, that typical surgical cut where the bottom skin from the jaw is cleanly removed. It also had other sexual organs that were removed, and they believed that they were burned off by some sort of laser high-intensity energy. The police said that they don't believe that it had any helicopter activity because there was a lot of these cottonwood-type seeds. And I don't know if they're cottonwood trees, but they're almost these fluffy seeds, and they were around the area. They believed that if a helicopter landed, it would have blown them away. They found they found some coyote tracks that would go up close to the cow, but none of them would try to eat at it. Now, this George Jimenez happened to, at the time, own the same exact property that Paul Martinez now owns. So you have mutilations, at least for 50 years, that have been going on this property. There's some other ones that have gone on in East Carbon, as well as the neighboring county, Emery County. Some other person reached out to us and gave us a report that recently happened not too long ago from a nearby city in Green River in a place called Rattlesnake Canyon, where they found 8 cows dead in the area, unexplained. He originally thought that maybe it was a rival rancher that had killed these cows in retaliation. Ranchers can be very close, but they're also constantly fighting over land rights, water rights, grazing rights, even road access. Sometimes they have to go to court for years just to say, hey, can I drive on this road to get on my property? It's a constant battle. So this area is only accessible by foot, by horse, or helicopter. And it's a really interesting police report that he sent me. They go out there, they look at it, the police notice that they have 8 dead cows. No blood has been found in these cows or around these cows. No predation. They'd been there quite a while. And it was their determination. They brought a vet out. They were actually skinning some pieces of it to see if there was any bullet wounds. They found 0 bullet wounds in these 8 cows. The vet ultimately determined that it was possibly malnutrition that had killed them. But there's still the answer of why is there no blood in them? And why is there no predators going after these cows? So this area and so many areas like it I think, have been shrouded in this mystery of cattle mutilation. And I think a lot of people have been looking into it secretively. And I think it's been a big interest in a lot of people secretively. But now this phenomenon's out a little more. And I think especially because I'm in Utah with Skinwalker Ranch, a lot of people watch the TV show. A lot of more people are coming out of the woodworks to talk about their stories, and they're willing to open up about this. And in fact, that story that ran in the local newspaper, the ETV News, about paranormal investigators investigating a cattle mutilation, which back in the day would have been stuffed multiple pages into the newspaper, and people would have laughed at it and not cared about it. It ended up being their most popular story of the year. So I think, and I could go on for endless amounts of time about people that have come forward and talking about the strange things they've seen out there, and other people that have had to experience mutilations or remember these times back in the 75. It's very strange, and it's something that I sort of got thrown into, and it's something that I've been a vegetarian for over like 20 years, so it's kind of strange for me to look into these cows that are being killed and mutilated. It's a very disturbing thing. There's a lot of ranchers that are very tough people, especially the ones from the 70s. They're some tough bastards, and some of them still won't talk about it now, just simply because it sends chills down their spine. But yeah, it's been very intense investigation. A lot of stuff has gone into it, and it's definitely been the lengthiest investigation I've ever been involved with.
Wow. So a couple questions, if I may, and I thought it was interesting that you talked about. Well, first, the power outage was piqued my interest, but the military, the Air Force aircraft, also piques my interest. In tandem with you saying this happened on federal land, because where I'm sort of going with that, obviously, I'm sure you know better than I do, that one of the theories is that there's a government agency who will take cows and potentially test them for like mad cow disease or something like that. But one of my questions, really, I don't know if you have any postulations on it, but like whoever's doing this, right? Why are they returning the animals at all, and especially in such a gruesome way? You know, if you're gonna take somebody's animal and test it for something, then why return it in pieces? I don't mean to be gross about it, but you know, I don't know, any thoughts on that one, I guess.
So that's the $1 million question, Mike. So
Okay.
a lot of people talk about, hey, is it extraterrestrial? And the one thing I would say is I don't know if it would be, in the sense that why are they returning the bodies? Like you said, if they're able to just suck these cows up into their craft, take what they want, they obviously have the technology to vaporize them, shoot them out into space, shoot them into another dimension,
Right. Yeah.
cremate them, do whatever they need to do. So why are the bodies being returned? I had the pleasure of talking with Linda Moulton Howe about this case a little bit, and that was one of the questions I asked her, thinking maybe she would have some insight into this. And she said that she's asked so many different law enforcement agencies and so many different people that same question, and no one seems to have an answer. I will say that it does make you lean towards this being involving man, or possibly something paranormal that's already on this earth, not necessarily something that's taking these cows into a ship. And then, you know, the old explanation of these being extraterrestrials, not from this planet. So it does make you lean towards this is either paranormal or man's involvement. So one of the theories, you're right, a lot of people talk about that the government wants to secretly study possibly the spread of certain diseases or check in on them. One of the biggest theories, especially in 75, was that was around the time that people started realizing that they were getting sick from all the nuclear testing that had been going on. And a lot of people that lived downwind were starting to develop cancer. And they were starting to look into suing the government and doing class action lawsuits. So one of the theories is that they were secretly sort of picking and choosing these cows in areas that were downwind from these nuclear testing and taking certain organs and pieces of them that accumulate radiation to where they could be able to test whether or not this was a real thing that was going on, making people sick. I think that theory has a lot of weight to it, in the sense that in 1975, for whatever reason, there was just an explosion of cattle mutilations that year in particular. I don't think it explains what's going on now, though. I don't know why it's still a thing going on. Colm Kelleher, who was one of the main investigators of NIDS, the National Institute of Discovery Science. So this is the same organization that Robert Bigelow owned and ran, and they received the $22 million to buy and study what is now known as Skinwalker Ranch. They took a very high interest into cattle mutilations and animal mutilations to the extent of putting out little ads in newspapers. I found quite a few of them saying, "Hey, if you have a animal that's been mutilated and killed, call us. We'll investigate it for free. No charge to you. We have a lot of resources." And they released a lot of excellent papers about this. And I had the fortune of actually talking with him about this. And he said that in all their investigations with NIDS, they found that there was two common patterns. One is that it was paranormal. There was no explanation to it. It didn't have man's involvement. But then the second one, which is very eerie to me, is he said that the other pattern was that it seemed to be man's involvement trying to mimic what was going on in this paranormal. And so they would find, in certain instances, they found medical instruments nearby, or they were able to test the cow's blood or samples and found that there was a certain amount of sedatives in the cow. I know there was another article that I read from one of those East Carbon cattle mutilations back in 1975, where a veterinarian from Salt Lake City came down and took a look at it. And he noticed that there was, in quite a few of the ones that he saw, injection sites into the neck that he believed caused congestion into the cows, almost suffocating them. And then for whatever reason, after this injection happened, that's when they would take these parts off of them. So it's a fascinating thing. I don't have an answer. And every time you think you lean towards an explanation to this, someone brings up another point as to maybe point you to another direction as to what's going on with these cows and why are they being killed and take certain parts taken. And like your ultimate question, why are they leaving the bodies there?
I want to ask a couple other questions if I may, but also, in a way, this is almost like the abduction phenomenon with ETs. Like, some of them definitely seem like they're human in nature, and some of them don't, which is really bizarre to me. But that's, I guess, neither here nor there. I'm curious, though, to go back to the case that you investigated or potentially are still working on. Did you get a chance to take like an EMF meter out into the field at all and measure, or a Geiger counter or anything like that, to see if there was any type of frequencies?
Yes. So no elevated levels of radiation, no elevated levels of electromagnetic energy. We did take soil samples, one right next to the bull and then 125 feet away as a control. The biggest difference between these soil samples was the one nearest to the bull had a significant less amount of sulfur in the sample. Now, this could be simply described as, because sulfur, from what I understand in research, it's a very volatile substance. So if you have biomes and something decaying next to it, that could cause the breakdown of sulfur. But some other ones that may lean towards the paranormal is, a lot of times if you introduce high levels of heat or high levels of radiation, it can also break down sulfur. We did get there a little late, like I said, but one of the investigators, Ryan Burns, was on there a couple weeks before we got there. He noticed that the ground around it, and I noticed it as well, the ground right around the bull seemed very fluffy. Like it was almost like the ground had been tilled or something. It was very fluffy, and when you step on it, it would leave a footprint. But if you waited long enough, that ground would kind of fluff a little bit up again, or the desert winds would kind of blow away whatever tracks were near it. He also noticed, him and Paul noticed, a strange sort of chemical smell around the bull, almost like a clinical sort of chemical type smell that was coming from the bull. The EMF thing's interesting because they had a livestock investigator come out from the state. And what they want to do is they want to take a metal detector and run it over the body. They want to make sure that this wasn't shot. They want to look for bullets or anything strange. So he takes out his metal detector, starts waving it over the bull's body, and the metal detector completely malfunctions, seizes up, won't work anymore. He ends up putting it away and having to use a handheld, almost like the wand ones that you wave over people at like a concert. They don't find any bullets. He cuts the bull open. They look on the inside. At that point, there had been some maggots and certain flies that had laid eggs in there. Paul did put up cameras after this had happened, and we noticed that a lot of the birds wouldn't land on it or near it for about 2 months after it died. Also, when we were on site, this was the middle of August, so it was super hot. This is the perfect time to have flies and things buzzing around it. We saw no flies whatsoever. We saw 2 flying insects that were around it, landed for a second, and left. But it was very bizarre because when we got out there, you could definitely smell the decay, but yet there was no swarm of flies or anything there. It was just very bizarre. And the way his dog almost had a perimeter, like, hey, I'm a loyal dog and I'll do anything my master asks me, but I'm not getting anywhere close to this bull, was very strange. It's very bizarre.
Mike, also on the electricity going down for a while there, you're probably familiar with the fact that during paranormal events, electricity can be drawn on from, say, camcorders in the past. Camcorder batteries would go flat. Maybe a cell phone battery would be drawn on. So I think something paranormal is drawing on the electricity to manifest or to come into our reality. I'm speculating, but have you heard about that sort of thing before, about drawing on electricity during this phenomenon?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think anything that has to do with electricity is a main focal point. So you always hear about these strange lights over nuclear power plants, as well as any sort of electrical power plant. And I can tell you firsthand, we went out there to stay a weekend. A buddy of mine, Cody Sparks, who's a paranormal investigator, we went out there to stay. And we had these electromagnetic devices we built, sort of like field units. You can leave them out, and it just takes readings. And then when you're done, you take them home, you plug them in, and see if there's any spikes. So we went out there and we placed 2 of them, one pretty close to the bull and one a little bit further away. And I put 2 trail cameras, one facing one of these devices and another one facing the other one, just on the offset chance that I wanted to make sure that no one was messing with these devices. So I placed the one next to the bull. I put some rocks around it to hold it in place. It was just in like a Tupperware to block it from the elements. And it had a solar battery on top with a bag over it to once again block it from the elements. I set up the trail cam and we go do our investigation. We come back about a day and a half later, and the electromagnetic meter is up off the ground and the rocks underneath it, and the battery had slid off the top. So at first I was like, you know what? There's a lot of coyotes out here. Right before we got out there, Paul had seen a black bear in the area. They also have bobcats, rabbits. So I'm like, you know what? It's probably just an animal that picked up the device. A rock slipped underneath it. No big deal. We'll actually get to see what it is on this trail camera. So when I get home, I look at the trail camera, and its batteries had been completely drained.
Oh, wow.
Its batteries, I've been using the same exact trail cameras for years. I know how long you can kind of keep them out. It had enough battery power to be out there for probably 2 to 3 weeks. Sometime within 24 hours of putting it out there, its batteries were completely drained. I checked the device. I go, maybe there's some electromagnetic data that's on this device. There's no data on that device. So at that point, I go, it's effing with us. That's what I said out loud. I go, it's messing with us.
Yeah.
This thing somehow knows how to drain batteries, mess with our devices, and leave no tracks. We found no sort of animal tracks around it, no footprints. And that was really the thing that made me personally go, something paranormal's happening here. I can't tell you, once again, it's, is it man doing this? Is it paranormal? I think it's a mix of 2, and I think man is interested in the paranormal. So it's like us, we want to investigate it. And you're totally right, Stu. Like this electricity, if something happens in the area, and the power company can't even explain why their system went down, it adds a lot of weight to the possibility that something happened in the area to allow this to come forth, whether it's interdimensional or whatever this thing is creating a lot of energy, but knocking out other energy, if that makes sense.
One of the other things that stood out to me was your comment that the cow sort of went astray from the herd shortly before this happened. I mean, I don't know. We can't read the mind of a cow, right? But like, that's interesting. Like, does the cow know in advance of, like, is it getting pulled away, or I don't know. I just wanted to toss that out there. Like, I don't know if there's anything to say about that, but other than it's weird, right? I mean, has that ever happened before? Has anyone ever noticed like the cows acting weird before they get discovered being mutilated?
Yep. Happens a lot. So a lot of
Okay.
times the cow will wander away from the herd. So one of the other mutilations that Paul had was a heifer that was pregnant at the time, and she was near giving birth, very young, very healthy, and she had wandered away from the herd. And this was about 10 years ago, a little over 10 years ago. Now he says, when a cow goes to give birth, a lot of times they'll wander away on their own, give birth. A lot of animals will because they're afraid of predators or things like that. They want to get away and do it secretively. So they show up the next day and the cow's dead and its eye had been mutilated. And at first he thought, oh, this cow had been shot. But they brought out a veterinarian. The veterinarian looked at it and said, no, this wasn't shot. I have no idea how and why this cow died. But you see that a lot, almost like the cow's confused, or like you said, they're almost being lured in away from the pack. Almost like you would lure an animal away from another pack so you could kill it without disturbing the other ones, or making it easier for you to sneak up on it because now it doesn't have its buddies to sort of call out to it. There's so many different theories, but yeah, it's happened to Paul multiple times. And from my research, it's happened a lot of times if the rancher is able to sort of witness this before they see the dead body.
Now, these veterinarians that get involved in this must be a wealth of information, but I imagine they're not forthcoming about speaking about this. How have you found the veterinarians to be?
So in the 70s, a lot of the newspaper articles, I think there was such stigma in it that a lot of these veterinarians would simply write it off as being predation. They would say like, well, it's the cow either died of natural causes or something else, and that these wounds are caused by predators. Now, I can tell you these ranchers are usually multi-generational. They've been in the game a long time. There's been cattle ranching for hundreds and hundreds of years in America. They understand what wounds from a predator look like, and they understand what wounds from someone that's going to cut them open look like, because they've had to do both. And I should say they've had to deal with predation. They've also had to cut open cows before. So I think the veterinarians didn't have an understanding of what it was like being a rancher and seeing this. And I think their first rational explanation is this. But it doesn't make sense that these predators wouldn't come back for these bodies and eat the entirety of them. Typically, if these cows die, they'll just be picked apart. Bears come in, they'll rip them off. They'll take pieces of them. Usually a cow in the middle of nowhere, eventually its bones will be scattered everywhere. But when these cattle mutilations happen, these bodies just sit there and have to sit there and decay. And they're not decaying at a normal rate a lot of times either. They're either slowed down. Paul in particular said that this cow, usually rigor mortis will set in, I don't know, 4 to 6 hours after a cow dies. It took several days for this cow to have rigor mortis, this latest one that Paul had. So I think in the 70s, a lot of vets didn't understand what was going on, and they didn't want to have this stigma. I would love to hear more veterinarians now talk about this, because I think the explanation that this is a disease is a little flimsy excuse, only because it's been going on for 50 years and they still don't have an explanation for it. And when I say 50 years, I mean the ones that have been documented. I think this has been going on a lot longer than it's been documented. But I found a very interesting news article from the 70s where someone said that this was leukemia, and that the organs that were missing or whatnot would shrink. And I thought that was the most crazy explanation as to why you would explain that these organs were surgically removed, because everyone knows when you get leukemia, within 24 to 48 hours, you die, and then your organs just become surgically removed and disappear. So I think they were really trying their best to explain something that they themselves couldn't explain. And I don't think they were being malicious. I think they were just trying to do whatever they could to explain what was going on, but yet still keep it within whatever you want to call this reality.
Is there any scorching on the ground to be found in terms of like a craft that's landed? And I'll tell you why I'm bringing this up.
Sure.
Because from what I understand, these areas where a craft has landed and has left maybe a scorch mark on the ground, animals won't approach that, or there's some sort of anomalous activity that doesn't occur in that area which would normally occur. So is there a parallel with those two phenomena?
There may be. I don't know of one which a craft like landing spot was nearby. However, I will say that there have been a lot of sightings from ranchers and nearby people who have seen strange lights in the sky. And then the next day they find a cow dead and mutilated. So one of the reports that the NIDS did was they called the Wolverton report. 'Cause he was an investigator in Montana, and they actually have a broke down spreadsheet in the back of it of all these sightings and cattle mutilations and whether or not strange lights were involved with them. So once again, you can go down that weird rabbit hole of, is this a UFO that these people saw, or is this a helicopter light? Some people talk about a very dim red light that they see, and then the next day they find these cows mutilated. Now, a lot of people speculate that these helicopters were using early versions of infrared, and that red light is a infrared emitter, so they're able to fly at night. And they were using helicopters that have these sound dampening blades or technology in them as far back as the 70s for especially in like Vietnam and stuff. They were using these helicopters to try and cut down on how much sound was there so they wouldn't alert the enemy. So it's one of those things where, once again, you go, is this paranormal? Is this man? Because a lot of explanations go to both.
All right. So with the idea that I want to talk about Skinwalker here for a second.
Sure.
Just like shift gear for quickly, because in our intro, I was telling Stuart a little bit about Utah because he had limited info on it, but it wasn't until that moment in time, because I've heard about the Shermans owning Skinwalker before Bigelow bought it, and that's when all the weird stuff started being reported. But it wasn't until I looked it up, it's like, oh, there was another family that owned it for like 60 years before the Shermans. Do you have any insight or intel about like if there was any kind of wild stuff happening prior to 1994 on or around Skinwalker Ranch?
So yeah, the Myers owned it for a lot of years before Skinwalker Ranch. The last Meyer, I forget her name, but she was living there alone for long periods of time too. As far as people have said, the Myers never had any strange encounters there, as well as the family. There's a family before, the Locks, that owned it, and they eventually, I think they leased a piece of it and then eventually sold that piece to the Myers. So we don't have any stories from them. However, the area in general has always been known to the Native Americans as being a place that has been cursed, and they did everything they could to go around that area. You also have early Spanish explorers there, mostly treasure seekers looking for gold. And there is one diary entry of them talking about strange lights in the sky in that area that they can't explain. So as far as the Myers are concerned, the Locks, as far as I understand, they never had any activity there. So it is strange that when the Shermans move in, that you have all this activity going on. A lot of people think that maybe it has some sort of military involvement, that they started getting involved with it around the same time as the Shermans. There's a million different theories, but I will say that area in general, at least to the Native Americans, the Shoshone and the Utes and the Navajo, have all considered that area a very cursed land. And it goes back to when the Navajos, the time of the fearing, when the Navajos were warring with the Utes, and they believe that they cursed this land, particularly with the curse of the Skinwalker. So yeah, it seems like there was always some sort of something there, but the Myers appear to have not had any experiences there, which is very, very bizarre. Another bizarre thing is that when NIDS was there, they never found any gamma radiation on the property. They never found anything like that. It wasn't until Brandon Fugel bought the ranch, and you can see it on the television show, that Travis Taylor and some other people started getting hit with this radiation and getting sick from it.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I agree. It's weird that we don't really have any stories before 94, but then as you were saying that, a thought popped into my head that it has been said that certain people will appear onto the land, and then the land, I know it sounds wild, right? But the land will react to the person. So maybe the Myers were neutral, or, whatever's out there was chill with the Myers, right? And then, when the Shermans cave in, it was just like, oh, hell no, not these people. I don't know. I'm just,
Yeah, Mike, that made me wonder, because I would ask the Shermans, had you had paranormal activity occur in your life before you moved here?
That would be, I don't know if we have that answer, if we can find that, that would be great to know. And what happened after they moved away, right? I don't know. Um, uh, wild card, Dustin, any knowledge of that one?
No, I don't. So the Shermans, I
Okay.
think when they left, they really wanted to put this behind them. I think it
Wow.
really affected them in a negative way. So a lot of people talk about that they made these stories up in order to sell this ranch. So
I think,
they had two other offers besides NIDS that were more money than what NIDS was going to offer them, but he turned it down. Terry Sherman turned it down. One of them was a hunting club, and the other one was a family. And they turned it down because he said, "I can't, in good conscience, know that another family is going to have to go through what we had gone through." So I believe the Shermans, and also me personally being on the property next to it, Space Wolf Research. I've seen on two separate occasions things I can't explain, and I've heard just so many stories from the area of people there. It's hard to dismiss so much testimony of high strangeness in this area. Not just in Skinwalker Ranch, but there's an amazing book called The Utah UFO Display by Junior Hicks and Frank Salisbury that really dives deep into a lot of the sightings, especially in the late 60s and early 70s. And Junior Hicks became sort of the on-site field investigator. If you saw something, people would go to him. And by, I think, 72, 73, they had so many reports compared to the population at the time, they deemed that at least 10% of the population of the area had what they considered excellent sightings.
Well, the fact that the Shermans didn't want to sell it to another family, which would have gotten them more money, tells me something about their integrity as a family, as people. I'm impressed.
Absolutely, yeah. And the Shermans, if you ask anyone in the area that knew them, would always say they're down to earth, good people. They just wanted to start a ranching business there. They deemed it their dream property when they bought it. They're like, this is where we're going to raise cattle and essentially retire and die here. But then all this strange stuff started happening to where it really threw a wrench into their dream situation, and they had to get the hell out of there.
In one interview I heard with Bigelow, I heard him say, "We know where it's coming from. We understand now what's happening." And I was fascinated. I wanted him to go further and tell me what's happening. Explain it to me. What do you know? And it hasn't been forthcoming from what I can tell.
No, and the NIDS, so whatever the NIDS data that they cataloged while they were on the ranch for so many years, since government money was involved with it, it's locked away. Like, we can't even get access to it. So when Brandon Fugel was going to buy the ranch, they asked him, "Hey, can you give us any of this data?" And he said, "No. Like, this, if you buy this ranch, it comes with nothing. I can't give you any data that we collected or anything about that." So really, the only stories are coming out from people that have sort of written books and talked about it in interviews, old members from NIDS, whatever they can share. I don't know what their NDAs include and don't include, but I think there's a lot of data that would be remarkable to look at. And when I say data, I mean literal scientific data, because they had a lot of instruments on that area. And it would be interesting to compare it to whatever they're getting now with the new crew over there with Eric Bard and everybody. Because like you guys were talking about, why didn't nothing happen with the Myers? So it'd be interesting to see why is this area changing over time? It's almost evolving or becoming more intense. Maybe it's less intense. And I do think there is a lot to, like you guys were talking about, how the environment reacts differently to different people. So when the Myers are there, perhaps whatever they were offering, whatever their energy was very neutral or not really interesting to whatever it is on the land. But then when the Shermans moved in, it was game on.
And then subsequent people are there to investigate the phenomena. So they're all almost setting up an expectation. We want to see something. Let's see something. Let's categorize it. Let's film it.
Yep.
Well, as we've talked about on other conversations, be careful with that.
Yes.
This phenomenon isn't here to be play party tricks or whatnot. So, okay, if maybe I misheard or maybe I'm confused. If NIDS was public money, that should be subject to FOIA requests, no?
It should be, and I'm sure people have tried, but the problem is if you're studying this ranch with government funding and it has to do with national security, they can deny it all they want. So let's say you're studying this ranch for developing weaponry or trying to use something from this phenomenon to either for defense or offense, you can simply say, well, this is a matter of national security. We're looking into this area. They may even not even be able to tell you why they were looking into this area. As you've seen those redacted reports so many times that come out that are just completely blacked out. And you kind of go, this is a waste of paper. Like, you're not telling us anything. And I agree with you. This should be 100% public knowledge. But I know that these FOIAs are constantly denied or redacted to the point where they're useless.
Mike, it's going to be classified if it's military industrial complex, and it's going to be classified if it's interdimensional extraterrestrial beings. Either way, you're going for a classification there.
I guess so. I'm just kind of curious. Has nothing to do with anything, right? But I'm gonna chat up Citizen D soon after this and find out what the crop circle scene was like around 1994 and around the time that they were doing all this exploration with NIDS. Maybe there's some weird ass connection there. I don't know. We'll find out. Well, okay. So if we can maybe shift gears again, if we have a little bit of time left, what I also wanted to talk to you, Dustin, about was you had a pretty interesting close encounter case, I believe it was, that I thought was really cool. That would be great to hear about here.
Sure. Sorry, I deal with so many of them, but do you?
I love it. I love that answer.
Well, I mean, whatever one's most interesting to you, I guess. The one that I was thinking about had to do with, I think, like a golden spider and a guy from Iraq or something.
Yeah.
But if you've got other stuff too,
No, I think that would be a good one to talk about, because I know you guys talk about a plethora of the phenomenon, and I do think that it's best to look at everything through a wide angle lens. And when you talk to these experiencers, they have such a wide breadth of experiences throughout their entire life. And I think it's such a huge misconception for people outside this phenomenon that they sort of look at coming in contact with a non-human being as winning the lottery. They go, well, how could you win it twice? Like, how could it happen again? But it just doesn't work that way. And so this case actually came in because of one of the congressional hearings. And I'm someone that's been a little pessimistic about these hearings because I haven't seen enough action as far as things being released. And I remember watching this hearing and going like, oh, here we go again. And I appreciate the whistleblowers and I think it's great, but I guess I always second guess whether or not Congress is taking this seriously and whether they're looking into this and doing that. So I kind of blew it off and I was just like, oh, this sucks. I don't know if we'll ever get any sort of disclosure. And then this case comes in. It was from the ERT team, the Experiencer Resource Team. So the team within MUFON that I'm a member of, where any cases that come in with non-human intelligence come to us. And he said he wanted to reach out because he was watching these congressional hearings, and he said, I think it's time to start telling my story. So for the sake of anonymity, we'll just call him Jacob. But Jacob, yeah, his first encounter was a very interesting one. He was about 3 or 4 years old, and he was laying wide awake on his bed, and he saw what he described as a dinner plate-sized golden glowing spider crawling across the ceiling towards him. And he said, I know I should have been terrified in this moment, but I just wasn't. He said, I was oddly calm, and this thing made its way over to where it was directly above him, and it slowly descended on a single strand before it touched his chest, and he said it sort of melded in with him.
Wow.
When he was 8 years old, he was riding his bicycle to basketball practice, gets to basketball practice, finds out that it had been canceled. He's riding his bike home, and he gets struck by a truck.
Oh, boy.
And he is rushed to the hospital. He has a lot of internal damage. His parents are told very bluntly, we do not know if your son is going to make it. Miraculously, after weeks of being in the hospital, he pulls through. He's able to come home. So he gets a second chance at life. But after this near-death experience, he also started to see things into the spiritual realm. So he started to see what he describes as like ghosts, apparitions, and most of all, shadow people. And he said it didn't help that as an 8-year-old kid, his room was in the dark basement of his parents' home. And so he said it really freaked him out for many, many years. He would later join the military at 19, and he would fight in the Iraq War. And there was one day where he was able to go to a historical place. It was sort of a reward for the soldiers to get away from the daily grind and actually visit something that had a historical value. So he went to this place, sent me a picture of it. There's him standing in front of like this big building in the background that used to be one of Saddam Hussein's palaces. And he said that they took him there because this area it's believed that Daniel and the Lion's Den occurred here. Mm-hmm. And since Babylon, Iraq now sits where Babylon once was, it's also here that he saw a jinn. And I didn't know much about jinns, but jinns are shape-shifting entities that share the same world with us. And a lot of people see them and describe them as being genie-like. And that's exactly how he described it. From the mid-thigh up, he said it looked very human-like. From the mid-thigh down, a thick white smoke that didn't move.
Wow.
And there's a lot of talk in the Holy Quran talks about it. It says that jinns are born from the smokeless flame of fire. And like us, they're given free will. So he sees this thing for maybe 10 or 15 seconds. It disappears. It got him thinking, well, what about this area? Is there other things? So he started talking with other soldiers that had been in this area for longer stints. And he found many other ones that had seen UFOs, jinns, cryptids. I even started researching it. And it is pretty shocking how many of our military men and women come back from the Middle East with encounters with these jinn. He also found out there that he started having sort of a clairvoyancy. He was able to sort of see in the future. And at first it started out as something very like simple and he was able to see whether or not some of his fellow troops were going to receive mail that day. So it became like a running gag. Like they would yell out, "Jacob, what's in the mail today?" And he would tell them whether or not something was going to be there.
Oh, wow.
So he ended up using this sort of ability. It came in much more handy when he was on the battlefield. So on 2 separate occasions, he was walking towards, unknowingly, an IED, an improvised explosive device that was buried in the ground. And he said both times he had this really intense magnetic sensation throughout his entire body that sort of sent this message to him to just stop, freeze, like don't move. And so he did. He would stand still, and after a couple moments, these IEDs would go off. And the shockwave alone would be enough to sort of injure him, but had he continued walking, he would have been dead. So he returns back home and serves his country proudly. But yeah, he said he was still struggling with anxiety and depression and PTSD. And he was trying to find, some sort of peace in his life. So he stumbled upon something called Qigong, this ancient Chinese philosophy and way of meditation. And like so many other experiencers, he said that he was able to get in these very deep meditative states that maybe would take people months or years of practice to get into. And one night he's meditating, and he's visited by the presence of a friend, someone he told me was the most spiritual person he'd ever known. And she was there with him. And she said that she wanted to let him know that she had passed on. And he said that, in this moment, he was incredibly sad, but he was happy that her presence was there. So they began to converse, and he simply asked her, well, what is death like? And she says to him, no matter what I tell you, you will never understand. You think of everything as linear. It's not. It's more like a spiral, is what she told him. They converse a little bit more. He goes to bed. The next morning, he wakes up to some phone calls from family and friends telling him that this woman that he knew, the most spiritual person ever, passed away the day before. So the reason he reached out to the ERT team is in 2018, he was asleep in his home. His wife was asleep next to him. And he woke up in the middle of the night, and all of a sudden he saw this portal open up on the wall. And he's staring at it, and all of a sudden the top half of a mantis-like being protruded out of it. And Jacob, he's no stranger to conflict. Like, he's been to war. So he said, I jumped out of the bed. I was like, I'm going to have to fight this thing. So he jumps out of bed. He gets a couple feet away from it. And this being waved its arm in like a circular motion and opened up another smaller portal, which he could look into. And he said it was so strange. He could see these very flirtatious women in this very, what he described as a clinical hospital-like setting. And this being said to him telepathically, look what I have for you. And Jacob said this really pissed him off. He was like, no, I'm married. Like, what are you talking about? And he said he turned directly to his wife, who's still dead to the world, and pointed to her and out loud to this being said, don't you see how hot my wife is? And the being looked at him very confused and tilted his head to the side and went back into the portal before it closed up. So he said for the next days or weeks, he was just riddled with anxiety of, is this thing going to come back? What did it want from me? Why was it here? Not too long after, the family would adopt a dog. A fellow family member had this dog originally, but then they had twins, and it was just too much for him. And this lady was going to take it back to the shelter. And Jacob has a huge heart, and he's like, "No way, we're going to take this dog. Like, do not take it back." So Jacob said that this dog's a bit of a troublemaker. He said it had to go outside every 4 or 5 hours. So him and his wife found themselves at random hours of the night going out to take this dog out to potty. So he said one night in the middle of the night, he's taking the dog out in the backyard while it's doing its business. He sees this sleek black sort of tic-tac object hovering above the trees in his backyard. He sees it for a couple seconds, and the next thing he knows, he's waking up in bed with zero recollection of ever walking back inside the house. His wife goes out on a different day in the complete middle of the night. She said she was standing there, and she was just kind of like waiting for the dog to finish up, and she looked up to look at the stars, and she noticed like right above her head there was a big area where she couldn't see any stars, but around it she could. And that's when she looked and sort of noticed that there was this big object that was just hovering above her head. And she grabbed the dog and ran inside. And then the one that he really wanted to talk about was on a separate night. He went out there and he saw this object hovering above a tree, and he described it as 2 black SUVs that had been welded in the back. And at first he said, "I know this doesn't make sense, but when I saw this thing hovering, I just said, oh, there's a car, there's a vehicle." But then he said, he finally was like, "Wait a minute, why is it hovering above this tree?" And he reached into his pocket to grab his phone. He was going to snap a picture of it, and all of a sudden this blue light started flashing really intensely at him from this craft. And he said the craft turned on its side, the blue light stayed there, and then he said this thing just shot off. And then when I asked him, "Well, what do you mean by shot off?" He said, in all his time in the military, he saw so many hypersonic jets and everything. He said everything he saw in the military, this thing made them all look like a snail. So now he said something very interesting to me. He said that after all these encounters, it was always when he was taking the dog outside in the middle of the night, he started to wonder, was this dog a choice? Or was it an illusion of choice? Was this something put in his life in order for them, whoever they are, more opportunities for contact? He would eventually convert to Buddhism and continue his meditative practices. And one day he's meditating, he's in a very deep meditative state, and he has this vision of this ball of energy that's tunneling through the earth. And he says, "I'm in Texas. I'm tunneling through this earth. I see this ball of energy go through. I see it go through mountains. I see it make its way up to Utah. It makes its way to a very specific building," he describes. He goes in it, follows this ball of energy. He says he goes up to a specific floor, a specific wing, a specific room. He goes inside. He sees a woman laying on a bed, and this ball of energy goes into her abdomen. He said it was this incredibly intense vision that he had. So much so he wanted to tell his mom about it. So he's describing it to his mom. He's describing the building, the wing, the floor, the room. And all of a sudden his mom gets very emotional, and she tells him, "That's you. And that's me. That's the hospital room you were born in."
Wow.
So he believes that he was shown his reincarnated soul being gifted to him. Now, his mom starts talking about a doctor that she knows that's of the LDS faith, who once told her a story about how he's delivering this baby. And not too long after he delivered this baby, he saw out of the corner of his eye this ghostly looking hand reach over and touch the baby's forehead before it disappeared. And the doctor believes that he witnessed the moment that this other baby was gifted its soul. So Jacob believes, and I've heard this so many times from so many different people in the field, that this phenomenon is showing itself to us in ways that make sense to us and align with our own beliefs. So I really was like, if that's true, that first encounter that he had with that golden spider was very, very interesting to me. For some reason, it stood out in my head. And maybe it's I have an intense fear of spiders or whatever it is. Maybe you don't, Stu, living in Australia, you're used to them. But here, it just stood out to me. And so I started looking into the symbolism of spiders, and I found this amazing article called The Thoughts of a Spider Web by Joshua Sokol. And it talks about all these researchers looking into the spider and the evolution of their webs and things like that. And they refer to spiders as having something called extended cognition. They're able to extend cognitive tasks outside of their own body by building their webs. And it really spoke to me, almost like these experiencers are spinning their own webs outside their own consciousness, outside their own physical bodies, and they're able to tap into whatever this is, and they're able to get insight into it that most of us don't. And then I also looked into the symbolism of the golden spider, and there's a lot of symbolism, and a lot of it aligns to Eastern philosophies that Jacob would eventually go into. And he would eventually, convert to Buddhism and Qigong. And I actually have the notes here. So I looked into, there's one called Taoism, which is another Eastern philosophy and religion. And that spider dangling from that single golden thread. And it says the Taoist perspective is that if you could fully perceive and align yourself with the golden thread, you would become a fully realized being. You would be conscious of and connected to all and everything in the universe.
Beautiful.
So I can't say that we have any answers as to why he's been seeing these things or what they are, but it was one of those cases I really loved talking with him. And it's just plethora of all these things that tie in with him seeing beings, him seeing UFOs, him seeing the jinns, ghosts, apparitions, interweaving itself with his own faith. It was quite the incredible case, and I just loved it. I loved investigating that one. He's such a good guy, and I still keep in touch. And to this day, he still has strange things that happen to him, and he sees them and tries to interpret them the best way he can.
Now, it sounds likely to me that someone or something would want to co-opt him to use his abilities. And it sounds like that Mantis experience was an attempt at co-opting him to use him in some way. And it wouldn't surprise me if he is working for the intelligence community, but I pause because if he's been so open with you about what's been happening in his life, perhaps he does not work for the intelligence agency. I'm not sure.
You never know, especially being tied with the military. He did ask me. He goes, "What was that thing about the Mantis? Like, why was he trying to trap me?" He looked at that portal as being like a trap, and I had to tell him. I go, no offense to you, you're a badass. You could kick my ass. You've been to war and all this. But if they wanted to take you, they would have just taken you. Like, there's nothing you can do. Like, they just would have taken you. So my theory about it was that he was being tested somehow. I think they were trying to see how he would react to this situation with these women in this portal. And of course, he went the very moral right route. And maybe that's who they were looking for. I wonder if he took them up on their offer, if that would have ended any sort of connection or contact after that. I don't know, Stu. I'm just throwing it out there. I'm like you. I'm just sort of this one big thought experiment. But yeah, I don't know.
No, I like it because these forces want us to use our free will. They want us to choose a direction. So that makes complete sense to me. And I like how deeply you've analyzed that situation. I found that whole account very fascinating. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that was it was wild, which is why I wanted to hear about it again. So just kind of like a wild card here to sort of wrap it up, I guess.
Sure.
Is Dustin, for you personally, what are we dealing with here in terms of the spaceships, the alien beings, the non-human intelligence, all this? Like, what is it?
I know this isn't. I know this isn't the sexiest clickbaity answer, but I don't know, and I know people want you to be definitive and be opinionated, but it's so hard when you hear so many experiencers' stories that tap into so many different facets of the phenomenon. I will say, however, I don't 100% hang my hat on any theory, but I will lean towards all of this is connected somehow. I think people like John Kill and Jacques Vallée and Junior Hicks and Frank Salisbury, all these people that have studied this for so long, and they believe that for whatever reason, whatever this energy is displaying itself to people in different ways. It could be coming from that same source. I don't know what that source is. People want to say it's evil. People want to say it's good, but we have so many people that are on one side of the fence, the other side of the fence, and everything in between. I'm just still looking into it. I don't have any definitive theory or really evidence that isn't contradictory to other evidence of what this could be.
Okay.
I feel that it's about our awakening, our remembering of who we are, especially that beautiful story about the gentleman seeing his own birth, basically, his own incarnation. He's being shown, here's you, and the confirmation by his mother. That's just a gorgeous, beautiful story.
I agree. Yeah, I got emotional when he was telling me it.
All right. In here, I was thinking you were going to say, I don't know, something that I could say. Aha! See, I told you so.
I'm waiting for you, Mike, to tell me what it is. I know
Um,
you're hitting the street and hitting the old trail and trying to figure this out. So I appreciate any insight. And what's great about this phenomenon is when you discuss it with other people. I've never seen it get into arguments. It's always
No.
like it's very calm and everyone respects everyone else's opinion and perspective. And it's really fun to think about. I think it really, you hit the right word, Stu, when you said awakening. I think it's awakened our minds of thinking that there's something far vastly greater than our own physical being. And yeah, it's fast. I love it. I don't look at MUFON as work. I look at it as a pleasure.
I feel like different spiritual traditions have different pieces of the puzzle. And I love that you brought up about Buddhism. I like that you brought up about the jinn. They're all there. It's like all the puzzle pieces are there on the table. We just need to put them together and see what picture emerges.
I agree.
Well, this has been fascinating because Mike told me this might be more a nuts and bolts conversation, and I'm pleased for both, you know, because I like the nuts and bolts and the esoteric together, and you've really brought that today. Amazing, thank you.
My pleasure. Yeah, I'm like you. I love nuts and bolts crap, but I think it's time to start exploring these other experiencer stories. And I know personally more and more people are reporting these kind of cases to MUFON, which I love. And I think we need to be more open-minded and we need to look at this thing from wide angle lens. Cause I know, I'm no spring chicken, but I know the younger people are way more open-minded. They don't want to just talk about the nuts and bolts craft. They're very interested in the spirituality of it, the consciousness, everything else. And I think it's beautiful. I think it's going in the right direction.
Absolutely.
Fantastic.
Any final thoughts?
No, I just thank you guys. I love the work you do. And what you guys are doing is serving the community by getting people to come on here and talk about this. And it's beautiful. What you guys are doing is beautiful. So thank you.
Well, appreciate that. Thank you so much. And thanks for hanging out and spending some time. It was very, very awesome.
Anytime, guys.
All right, Reverend Stu, what did you think about that one?
Mike, I was all set up for the nuts and bolts discussion. I thought I won't have much to say on this one. And then he went into the esotericism, and I was absolutely thrilled. I really liked that conversation.
That was awesome. I knew it was going to be awesome, but it was more awesome than I was even thinking. So, yes. And I'm glad that you were able to finally meet up with Dustin because we had planned for that quite a while ago. And yeah, I mean, that's the thing. It's a little bit of both. It's physical, it's non-physical. Like that's why we're here, right?
Well, I really appreciate what you guys do with the supporting experiences. And you might be surprised, but I see your role as somewhat similar to mine in supporting people who have had what I would term esoteric experiences and helping them to navigate that. It's a beautiful thing what you're both doing.
Thank you. And I would agree. Yes. There's been, a fair amount of times now where it's definitely they're different kind of conversations, and I've gotten emotional a couple times with people, and even though they might not be like I can sort of feel their energies coming across and such, and it is
Wow.
It's a special kind of a thing, and it's something that originally when we started doing this, I now see I have a different perspective. I almost a different perspective after every conversation we do, by the way. But now I'm realizing the really personal nature of like encounter investigation, as it were. And I don't know, I don't want to use the wrong type of a word, but I'm going to say reverence of it, right? Between two people where it doesn't, like when someone comes out and talks about whatever happened to them, it's not something that happened yesterday or 2 weeks ago. They work through it first, and then usually they might not even ever publicly speak about it. But what if they do publicly speak about it? It's because they've processed it for a very long time and they've come to terms with it, and then for whatever reason want to like inspire others or whatever the case may be.
Yeah. Well, I see a parallel with that and people having spiritual esoteric experiences. I see a direct correlation, which is why we're doing this show together and we're sincerely exploring this together. And then we're joined by amazing guests like Dustin today. I'm pleased to have had the interview today. And you know what? I'd absolutely be up for another interview with him because I've got a whole bunch more questions for him in the future.
Yeah, for sure. I would too. And we could probably definitely make that happen at some point. At some point in the future.
Thank you. Thank you for introducing me to him, Mike. That was fantastic.
Yeah, I figured you'd like that, and I'm glad that you did. So, what comes next? I don't know, Stuart. What do you think comes? What comes next?
Oh, okay. Well, there's so much going on in the world at the moment, and there are revelations supposedly coming forward about UAPs from government sources, official sources. So, I'm just waiting. I'm just waiting to see what happens, and when something is released, I'd like to discuss it with you. But I'm just going to wait and also see what other guests we have come forward. So I'm still interested, still along for the ride, and in a way, I've got no particular expectation. So in that way, I won't be disappointed if nothing happens. If something happens, I'll like it. Does that make sense, Mike?
That does make absolute sense. I think I'm right there with you. Definitely willing to have more conversations with you and others. But like I think we said at one other point in a not too distant past, like not really compelled to put stuff out just for the sake of following a schedule or something. Like we have so much to digest on this channel in the archives and such that, maybe we just take some time for ourselves and digest all of it as well. And then, if something should happen, or someone interesting wants to join us, we'll do that.
Okay, that sounds perfect, Mike. That suits me perfectly.
All right, so I don't know. It feels a little awkward, I gotta say.
That's all right.
Being blunt.
No, that's okay. I've got quite a lot to digest after today's interview, so I'm going to look up some of the threads that were brought up, and I'll just see what happens next. What comes next in our lives?
Absolutely, yeah. And that reminds me, I got to reach out to Citizen D with the crop circles because I don't know, man. I feel like there might be something there. We're gonna find out. And I think he's almost ready to release his findings, his research too. So we might actually probably talk to him pretty soon as well. Hopefully, see how that goes.
Okay, I'm keen to make these connections between different phenomena. That'd be fantastic.
All right. So until that time comes, right?
Much love to everyone out there.